Alright, in this video we're going to look at how to build a simple to-do list app using Kivy in Python with an emphasis on some of the user interface features, particularly around color, which we haven't done a lot of or indeed at all yet. Also looking at sizing elements, so being able to position them a bit more precisely on our interface. So to begin with, we start with a simple Kivy app template with a single screen. I've gone ahead and done all that because we've done it plenty of times now. I'm sure that's easy enough for you to do. But we'll start with adding in our interface elements for our list screen. So as always, going to type it out, resist the temptation of copy and paste. So for this, I'm going to use a box layout with a vertical orientation. So we'll that's disappeared. So we'll stack them on top of each other. So vertical. And inside that box layout, we're going to add a label. This is basically just for our heading. So it's a to-do list. And I'm going to add in an attribute called size hint. And so what this is referring to is giving Kivy a clue around the proportion or how much space we want the label to take up. So in brackets, we'll say 1, 0.1. So what we're saying is that the x-axis or the width of our label is equal to 1, which is 100% of the width. So basically going across the whole window. And then 0.1 is referring to 10%. So it's going to take up 10% of the height of our screen. So size hint is used as one method of sizing or proportioning our elements. So underneath the label, we're going to include another box layout. And this one's going to be horizontal because it's going to hold both of our text input. So where we basically tell it what we want to include in our to-do list, as well as the button to action that. So before we get into those elements, we're going to use another variation. So the other way that we can size our elements is by using size hint y and obviously size hint x. And this is so we can control specifically the height and the width of the elements. So for this one, we're going to set, I don't need it in brackets for size hint y. So we're going to set it to 0.1. So it's going to also take up 10%. So that's the box which contains the text input and the button. So we don't have to add the height into those. So inside of this, we have our text input with the ID of list item. So that's what it is. Why is that not tabbing? Been having some issues with my Visual Studio Code this morning. There we go. Go the long way around. Size hint x. So this one we want it to be 0.8, so 4/5 of the width. And then our button will obviously take up the other 0.2. So text is add on press. So we're going to have a method called add item. Size hint x of 0.2. Alright, and then underneath that box layout, we're going to add one more box layout. So lots of boxes. So I guess having everything in a box does make it easier for positioning. But this one is going to have an ID of my list. So this is basically a box layout which will hold all the list elements as we generate them. So we'll save that. I did forget one thing. Because we've got an input, a text input of list item, we will add the link at the top, list item, list item, so that we can obviously get the text out of the Kivy element and put it into our Python code. Alright, so we have already sort of given away that we're going to add an element, a method called add item of self. We'll just pass that. Alright, sorry about that. I think we're back. So with the add item element, so when we want to get the item, obviously we have to get it back out of the interface. We then need to basically put an element into my list. So to do that, we've done this before. So list item is an object property. So because it's a method from Kivy, or an object from Kivy I should say, we want to import it. Property, there we go. So now we can get the text out. So actually let's call it items, probably better. So self.listItem.text. And so we're going to identify the list. So previously we've gone through and we've sort of said, well, the ID has got to be listed here and then listed here as an object property. We will look at an alternative method for this one. So this may be something you want to incorporate with things like item as well, but just wanted to show you that there is a couple of different ways of achieving the same result. So with this one, we're going to say self.ids, so IDs, and my list. So basically what it's doing is it's looking in the list screen for an ID of my list, which is what we've identified, this layout, this empty layout for our list. I just realized I should have tested that the interface elements worked before I've continued too deeply into this. So I'll just cover that here. So you can see the to-do list. Oh, I can't click on it. I need to just hover. So the to-do list takes up 10%. The text input and button takes up another 10%. And then we have the rest of the space for our actual list. Alright, so that's how the size hints work. I should have done that earlier. So we've now got that. So now what we want to do is create a new label. So new item, I'm going to call this object. And so this is a label. And very similar to a label in Kivy, because I don't believe we've done too much with creating Kivy elements in Python. We can add in these values. So text equals, so we don't use the colon because we're in Python. So the text is going to be equal to whatever the item was. Actually, we'll just start with that. We'll keep it nice and simple. So from Kivy.uix.label. So all the user interface elements are in the UIX library, if I could spell Kivy correctly. Import the label object. Alright, so actually I need one more step. We need to add the new label in. So list.add widget. So the add widget method, we've used this before when we've added screens to our screen manager. So basically add widget is for adding any object within another object. So within our list, we want to add new item. Alright, so if we give this a play, so it shows up, which is always a great start, but we'll just put in test to test it and add. And you'll see it says item. Oh, that's because I made it in quotation marks. That was silly of me. So we want to pass in the value of the item variable, not the actual word item. But I guess you saw it did work. So, oh, hang on, I've clicked the wrong thing here. So there we go. Test. You'll now see it says test. If we add another test, test 2, you'll see it continues to add to our list. Alright, so that's adding an item to our list. I guess the next thing we want to do as well with that is also to add a button to it. So again, we can add buttons here in our Python file. So after new item, we can add a button called complete, which is a button with text saying complete. And because we want these to sit together, what we'll do is very similar to what we've done up here with the text input and the button, is we'll look at including them inside of a box layout. So I'm going to call this frame. So we're going to frame it out with a box layout, orientation equals horizontal, because we want them to sit beside each other. Yeah, that's all we need there. So the label, we're going to put size hint x equal to 0.8. So it's going to be a similar sort of proportion to our text input and the add button. Just quickly bring that back. Size hint y. No, sorry, size hint x equals 0.2. Alright, so I will just import these before I forget as well. So UIX button is where we get the button from. And no prizes for guessing where we get the float layout from. Kivy UIX float layout. No, sorry, it's box layout. I don't know where I got a float from in my mind. We will look at float layouts in the near future. Pro tip. Alright, so let's save that. Why has it got an error? Oh, because I've got a 0 there. Probably doesn't belong. Alright, so I guess to put all this together, it's the same concept as what we had with the list to add the widget. So we want to put the new item and the complete button inside the frame. So we'll say frame dot add dot add widget, the new item, frame dot add widget, complete button, and then the list, we don't want to add the new item, we want to add the frame. So let's save that. So if we now run this, got our to-do list, so we say test, and we add, you can see now it says test, and we've got a complete button here. We'll just do another test. So you can see the complete button generates for each element that we add as well. Alright, so now we've got the button there, we can add some functionality to it. So because we want to add the button relative to the new item, we're not going to have a generic method set up to do that for each one. What we need to do is once we've created the button, so we've done our complete, we're going to use a method called bind, which allows us to attach something to the button. In this case, it's going to be an onPress method equals, so we could say self.complete item, we don't need the quotation marks there because it's working similar to this. But because we're binding it, it doesn't need to have the parentheses. So if we were to do this, and we do need to create a complete item method, that's the bit I'm forgetting. So self yes, what we'll do is we'll try and print the text. So label.text. So I think what we need to do is we need to self.complete item. I think we need to alright, we might just go to the full thing because I've forgotten the bit about how to run it for this. But basically, if you were to run it as is, it would try to do the same action for every button that's on the screen. So what we need to do is we do need to add in a little bit called partial. So basically this is saying is only refer to part of the code, which in this case is this particular element, and I'm going to add the new item in there as the label. So I do need to import that in. So this is from, and this is actually a Python method, not a Kivy one. So from func tools, so function tools, import partial. So basically this is allowing us to individually control each button as opposed to having to run this for every button that we've created. So now what we can do in our complete item is we can pass in the label. That's new item. So self is just we're referring to list screen as self. Label is the label that we've passed in as an attribute. But the other one, because we're running with partial, we need to include an attribute called instance. And it's basically just pointing to this instance of the button. So it sort of ties in with this partial command to say that we're not doing this for every button that has complete item on it. It's only the one that we've pressed. Alright, so this should then give us the print the label text down here. So we'll test it and we'll see how it acts. So we'll add in a couple of tests, test 1, test 2. Alright, so if I press the complete button, you'll see it says test. If I press this complete button, it'll say test 2. So it is tying this label to this button. Alright, so we've got test and test 2. There. So now we've got ourselves some functioning buttons that act upon each element of our to-do list. So now we've got the functionality out of the way. Let's look at adding in some more aesthetics and usability. And I guess what we're going to focus on a lot is color. So in Kivy, it uses the RGBA codes. So RGB you may be familiar with, as in red light, green light, blue light. A is an additional part of the code, which the A stands for alpha. So basically referring to the level of opacity or transparency, if you flip it around, of the color. So I usually think of A as amplitude, so basically how bright the color is in the sense of how much you can actually see it. So an alpha of 0 is transparent. As my headset cut out. So the alpha of 0 is transparent, whereas an alpha of 1 is completely opaque. So the RGB value with an alpha of 1 would be the same as just the RGB code that you would normally use. So we'll look at a few different ways of coloring. So the first one is if we want to color the background. So this is often a common one. There is a little shortcut. So what we're going to do is we're going to import from the core library and the window part of that. We're going to import a window object. And then straight under that, we can just say window.clear color. So note the American spelling of color. And then we can put in our RGB code. So all of our values need to be between 0 and 1. So it's not like a hexadecimal or binary code where you would go up to 255 for your red, green, and blue. It's between 0 and 1. So I'm going to put 0.9, 0.6, 0.8, and the alpha of 0.5. So so we've set our RGB code. All right, if we save and run this, you'll see it gives us a very pastel pink background. Just trying to come up with some colors that contrast, maybe not in a good way, but just to show you how the different elements color in. All right, and you can see basically the label is transparent, so you can see straight through it. The text input remains with the white background, so you can see where it is, and the button does have its own color. So speaking of which, we'll look at adding the color next. So adding the button color next. There we go. So with the buttons and labels work in a somewhat similar way too. We can consider two different parts. We can consider the background color as well as the text color of the button. So with this one, what we'll do is we'll go a nice light color as the background color, and then we'll flip the text color to be black. So I think it's an orange color from memory. So in our Kivy file, so we can do this underneath, but what we want to say is background underscore color, again American spelling. So if we say 0.6, 0.8, 1, and then color, so just color for the text color. So because we want black, we'll just go on 0001. Should put some spaces in there so it looks a bit nicer. You don't have to. I could have left it just to show you don't have to. Alright, but if we now run this, actually I think it was supposed to be a blue color, RGB of course. So you'll notice it's still a very dark muted grey color. Alright, so actually I can show it on here. So if I add something in, test, so you can see by default the button has a very grey texture to it. That's done so obviously it contrasts with the default background. Obviously we've changed the background, so there's a lot of contrast at the moment. But even when we just run with the black background, the grey button does contrast enough for you to see that it's a button. So what we can do is if we want to get that bright color, is we can add in another attribute called background normal. And we just set it to an empty string, so we're basically removing the normal background. Alright, we run our main.py file again, and it has a little meltdown. What have I done wrong? Invalid property name. Oh, it's because I put equals. Rookie error. Don't feel bad if you've done the same. There we go. So now when I bring this across, you'll see it's a nice baby blue color. And the black text contrasts a lot better with that. Alright, so the last part is looking at coloring in the label. So as we said, the label is essentially transparent. it doesn't have a background for us to color in. So what we can do is we can sort of fake it in a sense by adding in a canvas behind the label to use as a space to color in. So yeah, canvas is the drawing tool in Kivy, so you can use it to draw different shapes and stuff. If you've looked at the Kivy documentation, you would have seen there's a Pong game tutorial that uses canvas to actually draw the paddles and the ball, and then you code the movement. But for our purpose, we're going to use the canvas, and we want to use it when we complete the item to basically highlight the label to say that this item is completed. So once we've printed the label, we'll say with label.canvas.before. So basically what we're saying is we want to draw a canvas where the label is, but we'll do it before you put the label on. So that's how it becomes like a background. So we then say label.bgcolor equals, and then we add the color property. So this one is 0. So basically what I'm adding in here is a pretty dark green sort of color to sort of highlight it, as in green is good to go. Alright, didn't want that. The other thing we need to add in is the actual element we're drawing. So background rectangle. And so this is an instance of the rectangle object. And what we're going to do is we're just going to set the position equal to the position of the label, and the size equal to the size of the label. So label.pos, label.size. So we do need to import the objects. So from Kivy.graphics, we will import color, and we will import rectangle. Alright, so now we don't get those squiggly lines anymore. So yes, what this is going to do is draw us a rectangle. It's going to be dark green. It's going to be in the same position and the same size as the label that we passed in. So if we run this, we've got our to-do list. Let's add in a couple of items. So test 2, test 3. Alright, and then let's say we finish the second item. We hit complete, and it converts to a dark green color. Alright, so that's the basics of coloring in Kivy. As you can see, the interface is a little bit nicer now than what it once was. There is some additional challenges that I've listed. The first one being to look at adding a delete button. So the same concept as the complete button in terms of how we add it in. The difference being is the delete item will actually remove the item from the to-do list. So there's a hint there that the opposite of add widget is remove widget. So do with that what you will. And there is a little bug as well that you might want to explore fixing. So I guess once we add in an additional item to our list, you'll notice that the canvas doesn't adjust to the previous. So this draws it based on that current position. So you may want to think about how you can adjust this to be dynamic. It is a challenge for a reason, in that I'm not going to go through it with you, but yeah, something for you to ponder if you've smashed through this already. But I think that's about all we'll cover with this one. So just again to recap, looked at adding elements inside of each other in terms of creating a dynamic list of labels. Also looked at the coloring, so making everything look nice and pretty.